Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, January 24th, 2013. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, Chris Colby, editor of Brew Your Own magazine, and I go back to basics and talk about the essentials of milling grain. It's a basic topic, but I learned some new stuff, so even if you think you know all about milling, stay tuned. If you're new to home brewing or would like to get into the hobby for the first time, check out our website, basicbrewing.com, where you can find archives of our audio and video podcasts and our DVDs to walk you through basic and more advanced brewing techniques. I'm on Twitter. My username is Basic Brewing, all one word, and I'm on Facebook at facebook.com/basicbrewing.james, and our show page on Facebook is at facebook.com/basicbrewing. Thanks again to everybody clicking on the Amazon.com associate link on our basicbrewing.com site. You know how that works. When you think of shopping on Amazon, go to our website first. Go to basicbrewing.com, find the Amazon link on the right-hand side of the page. Click on that. It will take you back to Amazon, and then you can shop as you would, and we'll get a little credit, a little hunk of what you buy. And it won't cost you any extra. That's the beauty thing of the whole thing. And you'll be helping us to bring you this show. We greatly appreciate your support. We also have associate links for Brew Your Own magazine and the American Homebrewers Association that work the same way on our site, too. And we also have a Basic Brewing iPhone app on iTunes, and our Android app is on Amazon.com. We're on the BlackBerry podcast directory, and we're on the Stitcher app as well. Our recently redesigned Brewer's Logbook will help you log the details and track up to 50 batches of beer. And with the handy blank planning calendar in the front, you get a year of planning, and the year starts as soon as you get your book in your hands. I've been sending a bunch of these out, and I'm always gratified to see the names of the repeat customers who've been using our logbooks for years. These are brewers who know exactly what they brewed over the past few years because they threw away those ragged yellow legal pads like I used to use, and they stepped up their game and got a little bit more organized. So can you say the same thing? Oi, we start off the mailbag this week with a letter of regret. Darnell Bronner was on the show last week sharing his specialty grains experiment, which was very fun and very informative. Darnell says, I forgot to mention the two other guys who helped me with the experiment. We got together at my house to do the experiment, and each brought a different grain. I feel terrible for not mentioning them. Michael Kaup and Howard Hallman. So thanks, Michael and Howard. Your help is very much appreciated. And Darnell, you can be done feeling terrible. Your guilt has been relieved there. So relax, don't worry, etc. Andrew from Clearwater writes with a handy tip. Actually, technically, I guess, a couple of tips. Andrew says, Hi, James, I thought you might get a kick out of this. I mostly keg now, but when I used to bottle, I was always looking for ways to speed it up. I grabbed a second spigot for my bucket, drilled a quick hole with a hole saw, and voila, two-handed bottling was born. It might look like you need the prestidigitation of a magician to work it out, but you'd be surprised at how well it works. I've turned a few brewers onto it, and they like it as well. Well, that's a great idea. Appreciate that, Andrew. It'll take a little coordination to master the prestidigitation. You notice I said prestidigitation okay, but screwed up the word magician. So that I was concentrating on the wrong thing. Anyway, it will take some coordination to make sure that you can monitor the flow into each bottle at the same time. But I'm sure with practice and some paper towels, you can master that. I told Andrew that I was going to take it one step further and duct tape a couple of cappers together too, but I was just kidding about that. Philip Lamb, our friend in France, whom you've heard in this show in the past, writes about a beer event coming up in his neck of the woods. As we heard from Philip when he was in town, good beer is making a foothold in France, a country known more for wine than beer, of course. Philip says, in order to promote the pairing of beer with food as a better solution than that of wine and food, we're holding a beer and food lunch one Sunday a month in Paris. Our next lunch is February 10th, and given the date's proximity to Mardi Gras, we're going with a Cajun theme. We'll have live music from the daughter of famous Cajun artists Mark and Anne Savoy. Sarah Savoy and her band, the Francadians. We'll have a hot sauce bar and, of course, free beads. We're trying to get a very special guest from Brooklyn Brewery to join us, but that's still to be decided. On the menu, Philip says, we have for an entree fried oyster po' boys served with Brooklyn Sriracha et Saison. For the main course, jambalaya with smoked chicken and andouille, served with a Brooklyn East India Pale Ale. For dessert, beignets de pomme, or apple fritters, served with either Brooklyn Black Ops or Duchesse de Bourgogne. I took Spanish in college. Depending on availability of Black Ops, Philip says. You can find out more and buy tickets at Sunday Beer Lunch 2. That's the number 2.brownpapertickets.com. €30 for 3 courses and 3 beers, or €20 with no beer. Why would you? Well, I guess if you're a designated driver. If you need that URL again, just rewind and listen again. Or you can email me and I can get you connected with Philip. That just sounds like a great amount of fun. Okay, in the January-February issue of Brew Your Own magazine, Chris Bible has an article on milling grain. It seems like a simple process, but there is a lot going on there. So I gave Chris Colby a call to talk more. Chris Colby, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
James, thanks for having me on the show.
We're going to talk about milling. Now, in the past, we've talked about conditioning your grain for milling, but we didn't really talk about the milling process in detail. And if you're doing all grain brewing especially, it's a pretty important process, isn't it?
Yeah, it can be. The quality of your grist is going to influence both your extract efficiency and the amount of tannins that you pull from the grain when you are lautering. So yeah, getting a nice crush is important.
Now, if you're doing specialty grains, you're just steeping the grains in a sock, essentially, in the water before you put your extract in. It's not such an important thing. You can just crush them with a rolling pin inside of a plastic bag and get a good enough crush to accomplish what you need. But since in all grain brewing you're dealing with a base malt that you need to get your fermentables from, you need to get as much of that out as possible. So what are the factors, or what factors are we looking at?
Well, there are quite a few, but the two big ones that you have control of as a home brewer, the vast majority of home brewers have a 2-roller mill, where one of the rollers is powered either by hand or by a drill or by a motor hooked up to some pulleys and sheaves. And so anyway, the two variables you really have to work with as a home brewer are the mill gap and the speed at which the rollers are being powered at.
Mind the gap.
Mind your gap.
As they say on the underground, as I understand. Why do we need to worry about the gap between the rollers?
Well, basically, the smaller that is, the more the grain is going to get sort of deformed and crushed as it goes through. So you want your gap to be far enough apart that you don't reduce the grain to flour from the starch and just a completely shattered husk. But you want conversely, you don't want it so far apart that entire kernels are going through, or that all you're doing is basically cracking the outside of the husk without actually exposing the endosperm.
So why wouldn't we want to, if we're wanting to get all the fermentables out of the grain, why don't we just mill it into a fine powder, into a flour, and just mix it all up in the water?
Well, if you increasingly fine crushes do yield better and better extract, at least up to a point. And why you wouldn't want that necessarily is because there's a trade-off there between extract efficiency, how much you're going to get from the grain, and how much tannins you pull out. The more you break the husk up into a bunch of pieces, the more there's just more surface area of husk in your grist, and the more tannins that you're going to pull out. And in addition, if the husks get too finely crushed, they're broken into too many small pieces. It makes lautering more difficult, and that's where if you reach a fineness of crush where suddenly your extract efficiency isn't improving anymore and maybe getting worse because uh, your mash sets up and you can't rinse the wort from it.
So if you got a big wad of goo there and that used to be your mash, you've gone too far.
Yeah, for most home brewers, finding a mill gap setting uh, is just a what am I trying to say? It,
It's an important thing.
yeah, it's a trial and error approach. You'll mill your grain at a certain setting. You start to look for visual cues. You want to see that everything is all the husks all the kernels are broken, but it's not reduced to flour, and so you'll start sort of looking at the grist, but you'll also check your extract efficiency each time. And a lot of homebrewers approach it by if they get a pretty good extract efficiency, they don't have any problems lautering. Next time they'll adjust the mill just slightly tighter, narrow the gap just a bit up until the point they have problems, and then back it off one step again, and there you'll get the most efficiency you can get without encountering the problems either of lautering or if you've crushed the husks up or torn the husks up such that you get excessive tannins in your beer.
Yeah, a lot of people are, especially when they're starting out with all grain brewing, they're so afraid of getting a stuck sparge. In other words, getting the wort stuck in their mash tun and not being able to get it out, that they will err on the side of not milling aggressively enough. And that's the way I was in the beginning, but I found that milling more aggressively was the factor that was most important in improving my efficiency over mash thickness or any of the other variables in the equation.
Yeah, your crush is going to be of everything you do in the mash. Your crush is going to be the variable that has the most influence on your extract efficiency. And I agree. A lot of homebrewers do start out, under crushing their malt with, what would be optimal in terms of extract efficiency, and that's actually probably a good thing because if the first couple times you brewed you had a stuck mash and everything was a big pain, you might never go back to brewing. So, it's good to for I think beginners to not initially worry about getting as much extract as they can from their all grain brew day until they've got the mechanics of the whole brew day down and sort of got all grain brewing down. Then working on your extract efficiency, that's a good project once you've gone through a couple brew days where you've mashed, you've sparged, you've collected the wort, and sort of just got the whole mechanics of what you're doing down.
So what is a good, if you've milled your grain and you take a look at it, what is your ideal of what you've got in your hand at the end of it?
You want to see relatively little flour. You want to see the starch granules. You want to see most of the kernels broken up at least into a couple starch granules. You want to see the husks, conversely, broken up as little as possible. If a lot of them are just sort of broken in half, two big pieces, that's a pretty good crush. It's really kind of hard to. There's different ways that people have of describing what a good crush should be, and some of it is like there's a set of graded sieves that commercial brewers sometimes use, and a certain percentage of the grist goes through this sieve, but not this one, and blah blah blah. And it's a sort of thing where, and pictures don't do a lot of good. A lot of homebrewing texts or homebrewing magazines will show a picture of a grist, and it's they're usually busy pictures, and it's really sort of hard to tell. But a good way is if you've got a local brewery that brews beer, just if you could go, watch a brew day there. It's kind of like seeing a good crush is one of those things that you'll sort of get it. You'll be like, oh yeah, now I know what that looks like. But describing it can be sometimes a little bit hard.
It's kind of like the Supreme Court in pornography, right?
It's a lot like
you know it when you see it.
Justice Scalia.
So if you're using brew in a bag, you don't have to worry so much about or you don't have to worry at all about establishing a grain bed. But you're saying that if you mill too finely, you are going to get the astringencies from the tannin. So you still have to pay attention to getting a good crush.
Right, and even if you ignore the tannin issue, I would wonder if you crush too finely in the brew in a bag, if when you lifted the bag out, you wouldn't just have sort of, little pockets in there that are just sort of like gelled and wouldn't flow freely out of. I don't know. That would be something you'd have to test.
Yeah, it'd be an interesting experiment to do something like mill, using a brew in the bag technique, just really narrow the gap and just see what happened.
Yeah.
See if you could actually screw it up.
So each one narrow the gap a little bit more, and monitor like your efficiency and the tannins that come out the end and how long lautering takes. Well, lautering when.
So the mill itself is, especially a 2-mill or a 2-roller mill, is a pretty simple machine.
Yeah, very straightforward.
So you got one mill that works and the other that doesn't, or it does work, but it's not powered. Why wouldn't you have a gear between the two to have them both rotate at the same speed?
That's a good question. I don't know if at a homebrewing scale if that's just sort of financially beyond what you would want, or if there's there's certainly differences in the article. In BYO, Chris talks about what the forces are on the grain, and as the grain goes through the roller mills, if the two rollers are spinning at roughly the same speed, they get compressed and broken up that way. But if the two rollers are moving at different speeds, for example, if one's powered and the other's just being pulled along by the grains, the greater the difference in the speed, the more sort of shredding and tearing you get of the of the malt. So yeah, a little bit of difference in the speed of the mills helps crush up the grain a little bit because you get a little tearing but not excessively. So that may be a feature, or I just don't know this. It might be that. Maybe it's just, putting the extra gearing and getting both the rollers spinning at the same time might not be cost effective for whatever benefits it would bring.
But if you've got a mill that's got one powered roller and one freewheeling roller, and you decide to motorize it, that is a factor in determining the quality of your mill, of the crush. I mean, I've still because I'm cheap and because my theory is I don't need less exercise in my life. I haven't motorized my grain mill, so I have to crank it, and so it doesn't go very fast. But I've seen other people's grain mills where they have an electric drill directly connected to the roller, and that one first roller goes pretty doggone fast. And Chris Bible is saying in the article that the difference between the speed gives you a different shear force and therefore affects the quality of your grain.
Right. I mean, I think we've all seen, people who grind with a power drill, and it goes pretty quickly. But a lot of times you look at the crush they get, and the husks will almost have, some of them will have like a feathered look, because they'll be torn apart rather than like smushed apart. Smushed being obviously the scientific word here. broken apart by compression, and and so yeah. Anyway, I think that well, I actually don't think I know that like the speed that when you're hand cranking a mill, you're cranking below what would be an optimal speed for the size rollers on a homebrew mill. But if you're using an electric drill, you're cranking it faster than is optimal. The best setup you can do is um, get a small motor, and you set up the pulleys and the sheaves at the in the right ratio, and get the mill rolling at a sort of intermediate speed between those two. And there's the speed at which it's moving depends on the diameter of the rollers, but it's you know um, not really all that fast on the small diameter homebrew mills.
So you're essentially you're wanted to do it in kind of a gentle way, and if you hook up your drill to your roller mill, it's going to go faster, and you're going to get through that 10 or 20 pounds of grain a lot faster. But you may not be doing yourself a favor. But the key is to keep an eye on it, to look at the results of what you've put through that mill and make sure that it's what you're looking for. And if it's not, maybe you need to back off the speed a bit.
Right. A lot of drills these days are variable speed. And some of them have actually quite a bit of torque at the lower speeds. And if you can manage to crush at the lower speed, you're still even the lowest speed on the drill, you're probably going a little bit too fast, but you're also probably not going to run into that much trouble. I mean, the key is just look to see how much like shredding looking of the grains you have versus when grains come out of a commercial mill that's set up right, the husks when they're broken, there's a clean edges around the break of the husk. It doesn't look like it's been like torn apart. It looks like it's been compressed and then shattered. So that would be something to look for.
Now, when I do, say, my Belgian recipe, where I put a lot of wheat in my Belgians for some reason. So I have, and I tried to track that reason. I couldn't find it the other day because somebody challenged me on it. They said, "Oh, you got a whole lot of wheat in that for a Belgian triple recipe." And I said, "Well, anyway, I couldn't figure out why I did it." But needless to say, regardless, I have a lot of wheat. And that I put in with Pilsner malt. And what I do, because wheat is a whole lot harder to run through the mill and to crank, what I do is I mix in the wheat with the Pilsner malt so that I have, it's easier on me, basically, rather than just doing all the Pilsner malt and then doing all that hard wheat at the same time. Is that a good thing to do or a bad thing to do?
I think it would depend on if the kernel size of the barley and the wheat malt were pretty close, then it'd probably just be a good thing because, like you say, you spread out the amount of wheat in there, and that just makes it easier on the arm to grind through all that. If there was a size difference and you were either letting if there's a size difference and you were letting the smaller of the kernels not get crushed as much as you would like, then it would be a problem. But it might not be. It might be the kind of thing where you just have to sort of on a case by case basis look at it. Or it also might be the kind of thing where maybe you'd have to double crush. Pick for the larger set a mill gap initially with the aim of crushing the larger of the two types of kernels, and then adjust the one for the smaller and run the whole thing through again. And you could mix it so that it makes it easy to hand crank, but you would have to do it twice.
Now, since grains like wheat and rye don't have a husk, they don't have. You're not trying to roll them out, so to speak, and preserve their outer shell, their outer coating. There, more scientific words. Is it less important? Is the gap setting with wheat and rye less critical than with barley?
That's a good question. Because you're just about always. People have tried 100% wheat beers. I've never heard of anyone trying 100% rye.
I have.
But you You have?
Yeah.
Did it work?
Well, yeah. It made beer, and if you like cough syrup, you love the mouthfeel of the finished product. But anyway, go on.
Yeah, I think it's usually, you know, normally in a wheat beer you've got, between 50 and 70% is wheat, but the rest is barley. And in a rye beer, it's usually, it varies from only a couple percentages of rye up to, I don't know what the normal max would be, but maybe 20, maybe. Um, it's normally not a huge component of the grain bill. So yeah, I think your restrictions or your the amount of variability that you could accept in the milling of either of those would be a little bit greater. Especially at a homebrew scale where you're not worried about you're not having to sell barrels and barrels and barrels of that beer and worry about your extract efficiency for that reason. You can get a decent crush that's going to make quality beer and not worry about it too much. That would be my guess.
Now, we did a whole episode or talked a lot about conditioning the grain, essentially wetting it just enough to help preserve the husks during the milling process. So there is that consideration as well, and maybe you need to go back and look in the archives, and that'd be a good episode to look up as well. But there are a lot of mills out there. Do you have an opinion on? I don't want you to endorse a particular brand, but are there features that you look for in a mill?
Yeah, there's mills are not hideously expensive, but they're one of the pieces of equipment that you're going to spend a little bit of money on, and they vary in a lot of different features. The simplest mills are like generally two roller with a fixed gap, and those would be the cheapest because you can't adjust them. You just have to hope that gap is going to be suitable for the kind of malt that you use. Then there are two roller mills where you can adjust the gap from one end. So you just basically bring the end of one roller closer or farther. So at some point the two rollers will be parallel, but if you tighten the gap, they're going to be not quite parallel. They'll be closer together at one end, and so you've actually got a gradient of different mill gaps going on, and those are the next most expensive because you've got the adjustment on the one end but not the other, and then there are two roller mills that you can adjust the gap on both sides, so you can move the rollers out parallel to each other. And you also have variables like some of them have larger diameter rollers, and those are generally better. There's a lot of different variables. I would just say that or at least from the commercial mills that I've seen at the homebrew level, you're not going to buy one that just like completely doesn't work. Like, I can't make beer from this. But the more advanced homebrewer you are and the more beer you brew, you're going to enjoy the ones where you have more ability to make adjustments, more ability to fine tune your crush, and probably you're going to enjoy sort of larger diameter roller mill compared to a smaller one.
Also, the hopper, where you pour the grain in before it gets crushed. There's a container sort of sitting on top of those rollers, and my hopper holds 5 to 6 pounds of grain, which is handy so that you don't have to get up and refill the hopper a lot or have somebody else there with you. So that's another factor to look at.
Yeah, a lot of for milling at home, if you've got if you're doing it by hand or with someone holding the electric drill, having two people can be a big asset because one person can just power the mill continuously and the other person can just sort of add grain to the hopper as it depletes. A nice thing about having a mill that runs on a motor and pulleys is that you're not doing anything active, other than turning on the switch, and you can just stand there with your sack of grain and sort of keep the hopper topped up and throughout the crushing.
And don't put your fingers in the mill while it's going.
Yeah, if you've motorized it, and I don't know if any homebrew outlets sell like the mills set up anymore, or if you have to every homebrew mill I've ever seen like that has been built. It would really pay for you to like put guards around the rollers, because it can be pretty easy to stick your fingers in there.
Yeah, there's a term called degloving that I believe the story came from somebody who accidentally stuck his finger in a roller mill, and if you can imagine the term degloving in reference to a finger, that'd be incentive enough not to put your finger in the roller.
Yeah.
Yeesh. So
I was in Belgium. We toured a brewery that was steam powered, and they had this huge. They had a central, like, I don't know what you call it, even like a central drive shaft running across the top of the first floor of the building, and it was powered by this steam engine with an enormous set of pulleys. And the funny thing was, like, they don't have like OSHA there, because these things were just sitting right there, and all the tourists and all the people visiting the place were just standing right there with the thing chugging away like inches from there. And if that had been in America, that would have been like behind a steel grate, and there would have been warning signs, and no, you wouldn't have, you as just a random tourist would not have been let anywhere near that. But I don't know, it's funny. In Belgium, there's a big, anyone could have just reached out and said, "Hey, what's this?" and lost a hand.
Watch out for that ponytail. Oh, that was a shame. Goodness. Okay. Well, we've gone down a little trail there, haven't we? What else? Is there anything else? I think we've covered it pretty well. Look at your gap. Look at your speed, the size of your rollers, the size of your hopper. I guess the main thing is the proof of the pudding is in the tasting. You look at what's coming out the business end of your mill, and you look at your numbers as far as your efficiency goes, and the amount of sugar that you're getting out of the mash tun, and just tweak it as you go.
Yeah, one little hint is, I'm a big advocate of taking good notes during your brewing session and recording everything. If you want to know what your mill gap is, so you can record that, or if you want to be able to set yours to, like you've read somewhere that, I use this mill gap and it works well. If you get one of those spark plug gap tools, they're a couple bucks at any sort of auto supply store, and they're just a bunch of small steel, I don't know if they're steel, but small metal plates that have the width of the plate printed on them. So you can go through and find for very small gaps, you can just, you see what's the thickest, plate you can insert in between that gap, and that'll tell you for thin gaps. And then for thicker ones, you have to combine two or more of the little, I don't know if you call them probes or whatever what they're called. But yeah, it's a spark plug gap tool will help you know what the measurement of your grain mill gap.
So throw those tiny calipers away.
Yes.
Well, very good. Oh, I wanted to mention that the recipe. This is the January-February issue we're talking about. The recipe for New Albion Ale is in here, along with an article about Jack McAuliffe, our friend and neighbor up here in Northwest Arkansas, and his wonderful beer, which is out now. Have you had it yet? Is it down your way yet?
I haven't seen it yet. I'm definitely interested in looking for it, because it's a little slice of history.
Yeah, it's a little slice of heaven. It's tasty beer.
There's also an article on malting in this issue.
Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff. And then our friend Mike Tonsmeyer and our other friend Nathan Zender did an article on the brewing dark lagers. So all kinds of stuff. Good issue. Good job, Chris.
Why, thank you, James.
We'll talk to you next time.
Okay.
Well, thanks again to Chris. You can get a free issue of Brew Your Own magazine by clicking on the banner on our basicbrewing.com site. And if you decide to subscribe after you read that issue, and who wouldn't, you'll be helping to support this show. And go out and support our buddy Jack McAuliffe. Or as the guy in the liquor store said the other day, Jack McAuliffe. Maybe you thought Jack was going to that beer event in Paris. Anyway, pick up a 6 or 2 of New Albion Ale and brew your own version, too, and have a side-by-side tasting of historic American beer. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com, or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com, and please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Be sure to check out our DVDs, Extract Brewing and Partial Mashing, Stepping into All Grain, Low-Tech Lagering and Decoction Mashing, and Introduction to Wine Kits. You can find them all on our website. We've got combo deals on our site as well to save you a few bucks if you want to buy more than one DVD at a time. And you can check out our shirts in the store, too. As I said at the beginning of the podcast, our logbooks are in the store as well. Keep track of up to 50 batches of beer. And it won't matter if you splash a little wort on them by the brew pot. You'll be okay. You can see a listing of the fine folks across the country who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com. And if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order them online in our online shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody who's continued to click on our Amazon.com link. We greatly appreciate the support there. Our featured products this week that were purchased through the link are Have a Heart 0745 Live Animal Professional Style 1-Door Chipmunk, Squirrel, Rat, and Weasel Trap. And Notice, safety glasses and safety shoes required in this area sign. 10-inch by 14-inch adhesive Duravinyl. Thanks again, everybody. And remember, I can't tell who bought what, so no worries there. Just click on the Amazon.com logo on our site the next time you feel like Amazon shopping. We greatly appreciate your support. Don't forget you can also join the American Homebrewers Association and subscribe to Brew Your Own magazine through the associate links on basicbrewing.com. It's all until next time. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dotson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.